everyone, can I get everyone to start taking a seat? We'll get started. All right, so firstly, thank you everyone for coming. Is it not working? No. Is that better? I'm going to move it across. Is that better? No? Hello? Is that better? Okay, I need to speak into it. All right, so we've got some exciting, we've got an exciting lineup of experts who'll be sharing their knowledge and insights into the most important topics affecting our industry today. First of all, we've got Hayley from Mitchell PT, a true property management expert. Oh, yeah, it is? No? Yep. It's not very loud though, sorry about that. Now, Hayley is very well versed in the complexities of legislation and compliance, and if anyone can make sense of the legal jargon and navigate through the ever-changing rules, it's definitely her. She's going to help us better understand the minimum standards and how it continues to impact our industry today. From there, we'll have Jordan from Detector Inspector. Now, love them or hate them, they are a crucial part of ensuring we meet our compliance obligations. They'll be discussing exactly what compliance means in practical terms and why it's such a crucial issue. Now, whilst compliance isn't the most favourable topic, it is something that we definitely need to keep on top of. Then we'll have Lee from Lion Lending. He'll be talking to us about the latest trends and predictions in the finance market. Lee's going to be sharing some insights on interest rates and what we can expect in the near future. He'll touch on who's borrowing right now and offer some tips on leveraging equity in current rental properties. Now, whilst Lee isn't a tax accountant, we have asked him to give us a bit of a rundown on some capital and tax benefits that are important to consider. And then, of course, we've got some of our sales agents that will be on the panel that will be asking some questions on today's market, and you'll have an opportunity for some Q&As after that as well. All right, so first up, we'll have Hayley. Thanks, Hayley.
Thank you. Let's see if we can get it a bit closer. All right. Can you hear me? Is it better? Is it all right? Turn it up a bit? Yeah, no. All right. Maybe if we hold it, it might be better without breaking it. I've already broken my clicker, so. Alrighty. Great start. Well done. Love this. No, it's only a little silicone thin. It's fine, guys. I didn't fully break it. I just made it adjustable. All right. We're good. Okay. So who was at the session I did here a few years ago? Couple of you where we're really trying to unpack all the changes. We now know what all the changes are. So like them or not, they're here to stay. What I would like to say also is Victoria is the first state to run with all of the changes. The other states are all following suit. They are starting to change the legislation in the other states as well. So what we will find is most of the states will end up having very similar legislation over time. So a lot of investors are like, we're so over Victoria. Go to Queensland, great, couple of years' time, it's going to be the same as Vic. So a lot of this is actually rolling out throughout the whole of Australia. So who actually read the housing statement when it came out earlier this year? No one? All right. So I'm going to start with that. Don't get angry at me. Daniel Andrews announced the housing statement and then walked out. So these are some of the changes that the government is trying to put in place to fix the housing crisis over the next 10 years. They understand that housing is very difficult and there's not enough supply to meet the current needs or the future needs of Victoria. So what they basically want to do is build 800,000 homes in the next 10 years. The government originally came out and said that's 80,000 a year for 10 years. We guarantee we'll get it done. Anyone watch the news a couple of months ago when there was a government, I don't even know who it was, and they said, we never said that. we just would get to 800,000 in the next 10 years. Very different. They then played them back the clip and said, no, you guaranteed 80,000 in a year. So that was quite amusing because we clearly haven't met our target for this year. They want to build better quality homes in places where Victorians want to live, and they're going to do a lot of skills and training as well. They also want to protect renters' rights. So they don't think that renters have enough rights across Victoria. Number one thing is they want to keep us out of VCAT. I actually don't have an issue with that whatsoever. They've already announced the Dispute Resolution Service, which is out early next year, which means that they will deal with a lot of the basic issues. If they can't get resolved through dispute resolution, they'll go to VCAT, but you have to be referred to VCAT. So I actually think that's quite a good thing, because if we can get together and mediate with people, hopefully we can resolve things without having to go to court. We also have to, with application forms, they want to try and streamline the application process, because applications are hard for renters to fill out. So there's going to be an application that we all have to use moving forward, probably early next year. And they realise that there's strong rental protections in Victoria, but they want to make them fairer. Okay, here's some changes. They're going to restrict rent increases between successive fixed-term leases where you as an owner evict a renter and then go to get another renter. So the end of fixed-term tenancy notice to vacate. It has also been announced that that notice to vacate is going to be removed. So the only way we will be able to evict a renter in the future is by having a valid reason. So the no reason notices to vacate are going to be removed, and we'll have to either sell the property, move into the property, change the use, demolish the property, and they will be our legitimate reasons. We can't at the moment solicit or encourage a higher offer of rent, but we can accept it if offered. From early next year, they're not going to allow that either. So even if it's going to be basically illegal for a renter to offer a higher rent, also illegal for us to accept it. So, yep.
Can a renter offer 6 months rent in advance?
At the moment, yes. In the future, no. Yeah. They want to make it an even playing field. So if you say it's going to be this much money, that's how much money you'll accept. You won't take any more. So that'll be an interesting one. The cost of living pressures as well. So again, VCAT is going to be a last resort, so it's going to go through dispute resolution. Okay, this is a funny one. So they're creating a portable bond scheme. So basically the way it works now, renter pays a bond, we lodge it with the RTBA, that sits with the tenancy until we release it at the end. It's our protection over the tenancy. They're creating a system at the moment where let's say I've got an agency, renters renting from me, then they're going to go and rent a property off McGrath. They can just transfer the bond that I'm holding to the new property. How? Because I don't know that they're going to get their bond back until I complete that final inspection and ensure the property's good, then I return it. But they're already in the other property by then. So I don't know how it's going to work. But we were told that they're building the software behind that at the moment, and that will be released next year. So hopefully there's like bridging finance in between or something. Anyway, watch this space. Rent increases and evictions are going to move from 60-day notice to 90-day notice. Okay, that will probably come out early next year as well. That's not such a big thing. It's just a change of our system and our processes. The funny thing is that rent increases used to be 90, and they moved back to 60 about 15 years ago. They're just moving to 90 again. So instead of us looking at them 3 months before the end of a tenancy to have enough time to negotiate, we're going to be looking at 4 months before the end of a tenancy to negotiate that out. That'll be a system thing that we just need to change. There's mandatory continuing professional development for real estate agents. I don't mind that as long as it's good training, not just ticker box training. And there's a 7.5% levy on short-term accommodation providers because they're trying to get short-term people to go back to the residential market. So that's things like Airbnb, Verbo, Booking.com. That won't be on hotels, and it will be on the gross amount that the guest pays, not the amount that the owners receive, which means that it's not 7.5, it works out to like 12 to 15% because it's on the cleaning fees, the Airbnb fees, all the processing fees and everything as well. So I personally own a couple of short-term. I don't think it's going to make a huge difference, but we'll see. So streamline application forms, and they realise that Victorian households are suffering rental stress, so they've put $2 million into a support package to try and help renters with financial matters. That's not even going to touch the surface. Like, we need a lot more than that. We need social housing is what we need, and that's our biggest issue that we have in Victoria, is there is not enough social housing to help those people that really need it the most. And unfortunately, a lot of that social housing pressure's gone to landlords. With a lot of changes that came in as well, it means that properties are better maintained, they might be renovated, and that has put the rents up. So a lot of the people that were paying lower rents aren't able to afford the new rents that are in the local marketplace. So it's been really interesting the last couple of years, and I have to say, as a property manager, and I've done this for 25 years, it is the toughest on us that I have experienced, because we've got higher expectations. We do a lot more work now than we ever have before. So it's a very, very interesting market. I will give a copy of my slideshow as well, so you guys can have a look at it later, but I've given you a whole lot of links. So I've given you the link to the government website about the housing statement. They also put out a progress update on the housing statement as well. So if you want to have a look at where they're at with everything, it's quite a interesting read. All right, minimum standards. So you've seen this all across the news about the task force that's currently going out, having a look at properties for minimum standards. So they have put a lot of money into this. We know that they've got the underquoting task force that's been in play for quite a few years now, and that's for sales, obviously, and that's now a permanent fixture. So that's staying forever. They've now brought out the minimum standards task force, and I assume that that will probably stay as a permanent fixture as well. So what they're looking at the moment is properties that don't meet rental minimum standards, any false advertising, if people aren't lodging bonds with the RTBA and excessive bonds as well, illegal notices to vacate, failure to provide a condition report, and any rental bidding. So minimum standards are basic things that people would expect in a functional home, like a kitchen, lockable doors. We pretty much hope that everyone has those. Structural sound and waterproofing. If you let a renter move into a property it doesn't meet minimum standards, it is a criminal offence. Maximum penalties are over $11,000 for individuals, $57,000 for companies. False advertising, other misleading conduct is a breach of Australian consumer law, and there's significant penalties for that as well. I'll give you an example of a property manager I know that was breached, and this is just giving you an idea of how far and how hard they're going against agents that do the wrong thing. So let's say we've got a property on REA and it's advertised at $350 a week. Let's say we approve an application on that property, or the application's under offer, and we want to remove it from REA, but we want to tell people that it's, the open's cancelled or something like that. Often in the price guide, a property manager will put under application or property leased awaiting sign up or something like that. So one agent put in there open cancelled. They got fined $11,000 because they put open cancelled, and the property was now online without a fixed price. And they tried to explain to CAV, we're only doing it to help people so they don't come to the open that was already scheduled. They said it doesn't matter, you've breached, it's online without a fixed price, and they got fined. So that's how hard they're going against us, and we have to be really, really careful because these laws are in place and we could accidentally do something. Like, that's a legitimate mistake. They didn't do it to try and rip anyone off, but they did get fined. So the minimum standards from CAV, so these basically mean that the day a renter moves in, the property has to meet minimum standards. If they don't, the renter can ask for the property to come up to minimum standards, or they can say, no, I'm not moving in, here's the keys back. Or those minimum standards are also an urgent repair, so the renter has a right to spend up to $2,500 to bring the property up to the required standard as well if the owner says no. So that's just the normal urgent repair process. It's in part Schedule 4 of the Residential Tenancies Regulations, and they apply if a rental agreement started on or after 29th March 21 or before 29th March 21 and become periodic after that date. At the moment, they do not apply if a rental agreement became periodic before the 29th March 21. There will be a line in the sand one day where they say everyone has to comply, but it hasn't kicked in yet. 60 penalty units for non-compliance with the minimum standard as well, so about $11,000 fine. So these are the current minimum standards. Bathroom, you have to have a wash basin, shower or bath, reasonable supply of hot and cold water. You have to have a shower head currently with a 3-star energy rating. But if the property is really old or you've got gravity-fed hot water or low shower pressure, you can have a 1 or 2 star. The electrical safety kicked in 29th of March 23. So when detector inspector go and do your electrical safety checks, they're going to tell you whether you need to make any upgrades to the property to be compliant with these new changes. Okay? You've got to have a modern switchboard, circuit breakers, electrical safety switches. So I actually don't have an issue with that at all because some of those old ceramic, what were they, federal fuse boxes? I don't know, where they had the little bit of wire in them, and someone said, oh, you didn't even need the wire, you just shove a paper clip in. I'm like, God, no wonder houses burn down all the time. And look, the way we used to use power when they were created, we obviously need a lot more resourceful for all the electricity that we're using now. So I actually don't have a problem with the electrical safety at all. That's just more information about what you need. But as I said, just make sure that you use reputable people to check them, and then you'll know whether you're compliant or not. Heating. So at the moment, and the reason I'm saying at the moment, we've got more changes coming. So at the moment, you have to have either a non-ducted air conditioner or a heat pump with a 2-star above energy rating, gas space heater, 2-star above energy rating, ducted heating or hydronic heating with an outlet in the main living area, or a domestic solid fuel burning appliance, fireplace, wood burning stove. Sometimes, so like if you've got an apartment and let's say you're on the 5th floor, and if you're going to get a split system put into that property, it would cost you maybe $6,000 because you've got to get scaffolding and extra works done to the property. The cost can prohibit you from having to go to that level, and you can just put in a fixed panel heater. But realistically, apart from that, unless the council says no, owners corporation says no, or the cost prohibits you, you must have that in every property. That's just a heating guide, so that's something that Consumer Affairs brought out when the changes came in. Kitchen. Dedicated cooking, food prep area, a sink in good working order, reasonable supply of hot and cold water, stovetop in good working order, has to have at least 2 burners, and if you have an oven, has to be in good working order. So technically, you don't have to provide an oven, which I find really interesting. I've got an air fryer. Anyone that has an air fryer knows how good air fryers are. I barely use my oven anymore anyway. Laundry. So if there's a laundry on the property, reasonable supply of hot and cold water. So you don't have to supply a laundry, but if you do, it has to have good hot and cold water. Lighting has to be adequate. Most properties will be fine with this, but you've just got to make sure you've got enough lighting, whether artificial or natural light. Locks. Oh my God, CAV has changed their definition of a deadlock about 15 times. They're now saying it is a deadlock again. They called them dead latches for a really long time, but they're back to deadlocks. But basically, a deadlock has to have at least 1 cylinder, has to be able to automatically lock when you close the door, so you don't lock it with a key. And you have to be able to use a key from the outside, but it can be opened with or without one on the inside. But if there's another security barrier preventing access, like a owner's corporation security door, then you wouldn't have to have a deadlock on your apartment door. So most locks are going to be okay with this. Mould and damp caused by related to building structure. Properties have to be structurally sound and weatherproof. They have to have good working toilets, which you would hope that they do. They've got to be in a separate room in the property by themselves, or an appropriate room like a bathroom or combined bathroom and laundry. Ventilation, they have to have adequate ventilation in habitable rooms. They have to have vermin-proof bins, like normal rubbish and recycling bins, so council bin. Window coverings. So window coverings have to block light and provide privacy to the renter, and they've got to be in the living room and the bedrooms. So I've given you an interesting VCAT case there if you want to check the link at a later date. But basically the sheer blinds, so if you had something like this, that is not adequate in a lounge room. So someone did try and say that the sheer blinds were blocked light and provided privacy, and they obviously don't. So it did go to VCAT, landlord lost. And windows. So windows that are capable of opening must have functioning latch to secure against external entry, and they must be able to be kept in the open or closed position as well. All right, so what do you think about those? They're not too onerous, are they? Most of them are like pretty basic. Most houses will have all of those. All right, here's your upcoming minimum changes. Now we are waiting for these to be written, but they have passed, so they are coming. Blind cord safety anchor by 30th of October 25. Do not have an issue with that. That's your, Holland blinds or something like that. Safe for kids. Certain levels have to have them. You can actually order them online for nothing anyway, and you just drill them in. But I think that's actually a good minimum standard. Ceiling insulation. So this will kick in from October 25, where there's a new rental agreement or a conversion from a fixed term to periodic, and where there's no ceiling insulation present. So obviously, if you're in an apartment and you can't put in ceiling insulation because you're stacked on each other, you don't have to do it. But for those houses where there's no insulation present, it is going to become a requirement. These changes will kick in 12 months after the legislation's written and put in place. Has not happened yet, so it's not going to happen in October 25. It is going to push out a bit, okay? But I've just kept them here because we don't know the exact date yet. Cooling. So who hasn't got a functioning air conditioner in their main living area at the moment? Okay, so you're going to have to put one in. Yeah, it's coming. So where there's no existing cooling, where there is a new rental agreement conversion from fixed term to periodic, where there's no existing cooling at the end of the life of an existing cooling system as well, and then from October 27, all rental properties will have to have them. So if your trigger's not met by October 27, then October 27 is when you have to do it. Draft proofing. So from October, there'll be where there's a new rental agreement or conversion from fixed term to periodic, you'll have to draft proof the property. There will be some leeway. We haven't got it all written yet. But for example, let's say you get detector inspector out to do a safety check for gas, and they check to see, I'm going to say this really badly, so you're probably going to go, God, she's an idiot. But anyway, where they check that negative pressure to draw test and they pass it and it's all good, if you then go and draft proof all the property, then that test that was recently done is no longer applicable because it will be different because the ventilation's changed in the property. Is that right? Cool. So when detector inspector or someone goes and does a gas safety check, they check that negative pressure to make sure that when the heater's turned on and fans are turned on and everything like that, that the gases don't come back in. If we were then draft proof for property, then the ventilation requirements in the property change, so the tests that they recently did may be not applicable anymore. Correct? Yeah. So,
But how do you draft proof a property though?
like beading in windows, yep. Yeah. Yeah, windows, doors, that sort of thing. Yeah. I think we're going to see more mould.
100% as well.
Yeah. But anyway, there you go. So that'll be fun. Heating. So from October 25, at the end of the life of existing heating systems, we're going to go up to a higher level of heating, so star rating. Hot water. So they're trying to get they're really trying to push the heat pump, hot water units at the moment, and they're trying to get rid of all the gas and put in electrical. So there's going to be a whole lot of changes. What you'll find though is the government's already started to bring out incentives for people to actually change over. So my friend recently, her hot water service blew up. She was showering at my house every day for a week while she sorted it out. But her plumber came out and put in a heat pump, and it was a government scheme where it was like $1,000 for this massive hot water unit. So there's a lot of schemes out there that will be cheaper for you guys to actually change a lot of these things over as well. And then shower heads. So currently 3-star, that's going to move up as well. So if you want to read more about the changes, there was a regulatory impact statement that was prepared. And as part of that document as well, they did an exposure draft. They then did a letter of assessment, and then they did the impact assessment as well. So if you want to have a read of all of those, you can feel free. I find all of that stuff really interesting. So this is an example of penalty units. I touched on that before. So one penalty unit is currently $197.59. So for example, minimum standards, 60 penalty units. So if you rent out a property that is not compliant with the minimum standard, CAV ends up coming out, looking at it, going, nope, you shouldn't have leased out that property. They can apportion that fine of 60 times $197.59. They've already, I think, the current count's 450,000 of fines that have been done this year alone. All right, so part of what we do as a property manager, whenever you sign a lease, the property manager will send you a disclosure statement to fill out. You've all had them when you've signed up leases, and you're like, why am I filling this document out? That is not something that us as property managers can sign off on. It is something that the owner has to sign off on, and it's just new that's been brought in, and we have to do it. So there is 60 penalty units if you don't fill that out as well, so just be aware of that. We can't legally lease out a property without providing that disclosure back to the renter. These are the things that we have to disclose. Are you going to sell the property? If you have a right to lease the property, but you're not the owner. So for example, I don't know, it could be elderly parents that own the property, but the children are power of attorney. So the children have the right to lease the property even though they're not the legal owners of a property. If you've got a mortgage, but the mortgagee is about to take possession of a property, if there's an embedded electricity network, but we are going to see those disappear because they have been banned in the future anyway. If there's been a homicide in the last 5 years, if a property complies with rental minimum standards, so you sign that document, say, yeah, cool, my property complies, you want to make sure that your property actually does comply, okay, because it's on you if it doesn't. If you've received a notice for mould or damp in the last 3 years, you've got to put in the data for safety checks, so your gas, your electrical and your pool barrier compliance check, not your smoke alarm check for some reason, but that's okay. Is the property heritage listed? Has it been contaminated for drug trafficking or cultivation in the last 5 years? Asbestos, building or planning application, a building defect. You know, you might own a property that's part of a body corporate where the cladding has been deemed to be non-compliant, has to be removed, and there's an order against that property, but it hasn't been undertaken yet. So something like that is where you'd have to disclose. If there's a building work dispute, owner's corporation dispute, we have to give an owner's corporation rules to the renter. So these are my minimum standards best practice. So it's your responsibility to make sure that property meets minimum standards. At this stage, we can advertise the property that doesn't meet minimum standards as long as it meets minimum standards when a renter signs a lease. Okay, so I'll explain that. Let's say you put a property, you've got a renter living in your property, that renter's going to move out, you're going to put a new renter in, and we don't have a correct functioning heater in the main living area, but we have organised the quote, we've got it approved, and when this renter moves out, in between the tenancies, we're going to get it put in. That's absolutely fine, because we can advertise the property as such, as long as it's in the day a tenant is due to move into that property, okay? In the future, the government has said that we're not even going to be able to advertise them until they meet the minimum standard. So there could be a bit of a delay between, because, you know, that tenant doesn't want you to be there for 2 days putting in a heater when they're just moving out of the property or something like that. So just keep that in mind. With those vacancy periods, we may need to not advertise the property till we're sure it meets minimum standards. I think that's going to come in early next year, but they haven't given us a date yet. You as an owner, when you're signing off on the minimum standards on the disclosure, you should be making sure your property complies. It's not an agent's responsibility, it's on an owner. If you're not sure that your property complies, then the guys at McGrath can organise a minimum standards check. There's a whole heap of companies that will go out and do them. They'll basically go to your property, they'll tick off on everything, they'll say, yep, you comply, and off you go, you're safe and secure. Or you do it and you make sure that your property is correct. Yes. There's a couple of different companies around. The ones I've seen are anywhere between kind of 150 and 200. I don't know whether the cost will go up when there's extra minimum standards, because if they've got to get in the roof and look at insulation, if they've got to check draft proofing, you know, all of that sort of stuff, then it'll probably go up. But at the moment, the companies I've seen have been around that 150 to 200. So, yeah. If you want to use a minimum standards checklist yourself, this is just a little one that I got off the CAV website, and I thought I'd just put it in here for you. But bathroom, you've got to make sure that it's got everything correct. The showers have to have that 3-star efficiency. Your electrical safety has to be correct. Make sure your electrician tells you it is, or your compliance safety check companies. Heating, you have to make sure that your property complies with the heating. The kitchen, you've got to have that food prep, the stove, and the sink. Laundry, good supply of hot and cold water, adequate lighting, locks working.
On the laundry, because I know a lot of the new apartments,
yes,
and even new houses only have cold water. So what happens? Do we have to put that in?
Yes. So that's what I would recommend in that case, because when this actually came out, the bill came out in 2018, I actually locked myself away for 2 weeks and I read it, and I've still got all my notes. And I put a highlight around that one, the laundry with hot and cold water, because I said that's actually not the way that washing machines work nowadays. You don't plug into hot water, you plug into cold, and it will heat it to the temperature you need. So my idea to get around the legislation is put in a washing machine that heats the water to the right temperature, and therefore it's compliant with hot and cold water.
So it's up to the owner to supply a washing machine?
Technically, if you want to comply, yes. Or you need to put in hot water. It's stupid.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping they'll change it, but they haven't yet.
There'll be homes that will have to run a hot water tap in the laundry. They're not willing to provide a washing machine for the
Yep. Technically, yes. Yep. Yeah. And it comes back to when people are building properties, hopefully they're starting to make the right changes to suit legislation, but they won't. And I'm hoping that this part will change, because that's, to me, that's silly. So, yeah, the only way around it though, and I've spoken to CAV, they said, yeah, if you put in your own washing machine, you've technically complied because you're providing hot water. Yep. I know, it's just stupid. Locks, make sure you got the right locks, your mould and damp's correct and you're structurally sound. Make sure that you have the toilets that are working, your ventilation's good, your vermin-proof bins, your window coverings, and that your windows can open and close and lock correctly as well. So, questions?
I think we're all dumbfounded now.
I know, and look, a lot of them are basic and really don't have much of a impact. So,
Going back to the point about disclosure statement about having to sell,
yes,
at the time of signing the agreement, I don't intend to sell.
yep,
But things will change,
yes,
and I might need to sell.
correct.
What do I do then?
Okay, so the way it works with the selling, so let's say that you tick the box and you say no. And then halfway through the tenancy, you're like, okay, I need to sell this property for whatever reason. When we serve a notice of intention to sell form on the renter, They then have 14 days where they can give notice and move out, even if they're on a fixed term lease, right? So you can still sell it, but the tenant has the option of giving you notice and moving, because at the time when they signed the lease, you said you weren't going to sell, and now you are selling. So you then run the risk of having a vacant property when you thought it would be tenanted through the sale.
Isn't there also a requirement that if the tenant's signed a 12-month lease, he or she's got the right to stay there for the whole 12 months?
Yep, they've got the right to stay there, but they've also got a right to give you 14 days notice and go.
A new buyer
Yep.
may not buy that because of that being the case.
Yes. So if you have any inkling that you're going to sell the property, just tick yes. And then you've disclosed that you might sell the property, you might not, but you might. And then if you serve a notice of intention to sell, they can still move out, but they have to break their lease and pay penalties.
But is that a deterrence for renters? Like if you're disclosing, like I know that if I disclose that I'm going to sell the property, I probably wouldn't rent that house.
Do your renters read it?
Well, what if they do?
Yeah, it could be a deterrent.
Yeah.
Intention to sell also mentions that they can break the lease
Correct.
after 14 days.
Yep.
So you can't hold it if you break this.
Yeah,
It's a case.
I know. Yeah, it's just basically what it's saying is you can still sell it, but the tenant has a right to go if they don't want to go through a campaign. That's all. Yeah. So, any other questions? Yeah?
As an owner, are we best off, whenever a new tenant takes up a lease, are we best off just saying that there is a possibility that we will sell within the 12 months, just to safeguard us?
Yeah. If you have a...
What would that be the wisest thing
You
to...
can, but you may have tenants that don't take the property. So, yeah.
So we do take like if the house is leasing and if someone there just asking, listen, I want to rent month by month, which they do, why can't we do it the other way?
So rent to a
Like-
periodic tenancy.
Well, if I'm the owner of the property and I got someone inside the property and he's telling me for the last 12 months he wants to rent month by month, right? He got the right to do that and he can get out anytime if he's month by month. So
Yeah,
what
he
I'm
can
trying
get-
to say is, can we do that? Imagine if I want to sell, go in the truck, can I say, all right, I can put you in, but we sign on a contract to stay here month by month.
Yeah, you can put people in on a periodic tenancy month to month, but then they can move out after a month.
They can just give us 2 weeks notice anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. But they rarely do. Like when you serve a notice of intention to sell, when the market is like it is now, generally they'll just stay through the campaign. The other thing is we have to pay them the prescribed compensation for every sales inspection, which is minimum $30, maximum half a day's rent. So they're getting paid when you're opening the property anyway. So, you know, it's just the way it works. Yeah.
I recently changed my lease to periodic with the thought I might be selling in the near future. So how much notice, if it's on a periodic lease, do you have to give if you're going to sell a property? I'd like the tenants to move out
Okay.
and do window dressing.
Yep.
So
So-
the property a bit before
Yeah.
I sell. Their trading garage is full of trading stuff. I'm not going to get people in.
So
You have the property full of
Yeah.
trading stuff. So.
the question was currently on a periodic tenancy, so month to month, and if you want to sell, what notice do you have to give to sell with vacant possession? And at the moment, 60 days.
60 days, okay.
From next year, 90 days.
Right, yeah.
But I don't know when next year it's going to
Yeah,
change.
it's gonna change.
So yeah, 60 days notice for vacant possession, and then if they don't move out, you've got to go through the VCAT process. Yeah. And you have to give documentary evidence with all your notices now. So if you want to give a tenant notice to vacate, the agent will come back to you and say, provide me with this, and then I can serve it.
Yeah.
So it's not the agent being annoying, it's just what we have to do now to get it across the line.
Same question. Maybe it's the same question. So if I've got a property, I've got a tenant on a 12-month lease.
Yep.
12-month lease. After that 12-month period, I want to sell the property.
Yep.
Right. So 90 days prior or 120 days prior, whatever, the agency gives the tenant notice, the tenant can then not turn around and basically say, I ain't going. That they have to leave. Is that right?
No.
And that's the so I've got to so I understand this correctly. So we've got a property, we've got a tenant.
Yeah.
I want to sell the property, 12-month lease. That tenant can turn around after they're there forever.
These.
They own the property.
If you go down the VCAT process.
I'm being an idiot. Sorry.
Yeah, no, you're not being an idiot, and it's really frustrating for us as well. In the old days, right, we would serve a notice to vacate, owner wants to sell the property. Tenants actually just moved out. They did the right thing and they moved out, and then you could sell the property. If you ever did have to go to VCAT because they didn't move out, you'd go to VCAT. If your notice was served correctly, you'd get possession. Off you go. Now we've got to overcome what they've called the reasonable and proportionate test, which means who would be worse off in this situation if we grant possession or don't grant possession, meaning your situation will come into account at VCAT. Are you suffering financial hardship? What are the reasons for having to sell the property? Blah, 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 blah. And then they'll look at the tenant situation, and if they're going to be rendered homeless by the notice to vacate, potentially you would have to sell the property with the tenants in place, which is exactly what happened to a property in Shepparton, where the agent could not get the tenants out of the property, so be rendered homeless. They had to sell it with a tenancy in place.
So they got control on your property?
Depending on the VCAT member, yes. So my whole thing is, if we get the right tenants in the beginning, we don't have these hassles. And we've got to be, if we get the right tenants in the beginning, we don't have these hassles. You will have, 500 tenants that are awesome, and then you'll get one that plays the rules hard, right? So don't think that everyone is out there to get you. Don't think that you can't have a property across Victoria, because there are ways to do things, but we have to be so much more detailed and accurate than ever before.
But just on that, if you sell a property, you sell a property with vacant possession, and the new purchaser wants to move into the property, and we've served the notice and all the rest of it, surely you can move the tenant on.
I haven't seen any cases that have been unsuccessful for that.
I just bought the property for myself to live in.
So in the Prezzo, I gave you a link to that blind hearing on Ostley. Ostley is where we have a whole lot of written reasons that are at VCAT for a whole lot of different hearings that have gone to play. So if you want to have a read of some interesting hearings, jump on there and just look for the residential tenancies ones, and then you'll see what we're dealing with. But most of the time they're pretty good. Yeah.
So we've got a property, we've got a tenant, we've done the right thing 90 days, 120 days. A family friend that's arrived from Greece who's struggling financially, right? Can they move into this property? They can't, of course not. Yeah.
It's happened to you, hasn't it?
No, it hasn't.
Yeah. A family member can move in.
Sorry?
A family member can move in. But you can always ring the tenant, negotiate something out and say, hey, would you... And I've done it before with tenants before, and they've gone, okay, I'll go. Yeah.
So let's say.
Do you want to wrap them up?
I know.
Yeah.
So we'll just have one last question, because I know that we're running a bit over time, and we could go on this for the topic for hours.
And I'm trying
more,
not to leave
but
too
we'll
much
just
negative.
have one more question, and then we'll move on to the
Yeah.
next one, if that's all right.
So, if I got a property with a tenant inside, and my property doesn't actually meet the needs of they need to be compliant, can I tell the tenant he needs to leave because the home is unsafe for them to stay there?
Yeah, there is a notice, which is an immediate notice to vacate for unsafe, but it's got to be like the house has fallen down unsafe. Like it can't just...
Draft. So many things.
So for that one, you could do a notice of repair where you have to renovate and bring the property up to a better standard. That's currently 60 days. Yeah. I made them all angry.
Thanks so much, Hayley. Like I said, we could be here for all night asking Hayley questions, but we do have to move on. Jordan, I'll have you up next. There will be the link that I'll push out to everybody that from Hayley's presentation, so you'll have that.
Are you plugging in a laptop? Okay. Let me just do a quick change for everyone. Sticky tape it on because mine fell off. You don't want yours to fall off. I sort of semi-caught it, so there you go.
Oh, I've got.
Okay, it goes in.
I'm not going to hold it like I did.
Oh yeah, it's on that side. Okay, that works.
So here we go. Just make sure that works before I leave. There you go. You're good to go.
Awesome. Thank you. Now it's just loading.
Stuff to get out of your way.
You need to really speak into the mic.
Yep.
I will.
Well, you might need to hold it.
I've turned it up a little bit more. Hopefully that works.
I just want to make sure. I didn't want to. Oh, I did the same thing. All right. Is that better? Okay. I'm probably going to forget that multiple times, so I do apologise in advance. I'm Jordan from Detector Inspector. I am your agency's account manager, so a representative, and help deal with compliance, any questions, training, all of the above in the beautiful world of safety checks, which I'm sure you've all loved over the past couple of years. We're going to go through a few things today. This is just a quick snapshot of what we'll go through. So an update on consumer affairs, a little bit further on from what Hayley discussed. The changes to Detector Inspectors reporting, and comparing the different providers and what we think the future of compliance is going to be. So this is our directors, Jordan and Jason, who started our company almost 20 years ago. They started just doing smoke alarms, and then in 2019 we started doing gas, and in 2020 electrical as well, along with the announcement from the government. We partner with real estates obviously to make homes safer, to make lives easier for property managers and you guys as rental providers. We're Australia's #1 compliance competitor, and we are Australia-wide. So we're currently in Victoria, Tasmania, New South Wales, South Australia and Queensland. So we do mostly smoke all over Australia at the moment until their legislation changes. We're also making around 4,000 homes safer each year, and we're doing about 650,000, 100,000 services a year. So that's just in the past 12 months, which is obviously very large scale. Most are in Victoria, obviously completing most homes we do 3 services on. All right. Oh, this is not. Oh, there we go. Sorry, guys. So how the checks came about. Obviously in 2018, late 2018, the Victorian government did announce that they were going to be bringing in new reforms to the current Residential Tenancies Act, which were overly complicated at first, a bit daunting, especially for your property managers, and I can imagine you guys as owners as well. Then they were delayed. They were meant to come into 2020, but they were delayed and came in March 2021, which, along with the minimum standards, as well as electrical and gas safety. As you can see, it's all fun to look at. It's all the wording your property managers have to deal with on a daily basis. So with those changes, they gave you about 2 years leniency. So any properties, as Hayley said, in an immediate lease, so any properties coming up for lease as of March 2021 had to have safety checks done and meet minimum standards. Any properties in a current lease or a periodic lease did not have to have those apply to them. But if you renewed the lease or the property went up for lease during that period or after that period, they had to be done. It's also just been announced today that all safety checks have to be done regardless of the property's lease date. That was literally announced this afternoon by the government due to old properties not having safety checks done, not in a current lease. They've been in there for 15 years, haven't had a lease in 12, and there's been fires and people have lost their lives. So that's been announced literally today. So that will be obviously a little bit of a future for compliance, is all properties have to have the checks completed. With the checks that have been completed, it left us, there was no rules on what actually needed to comply. There was the safety check standards, what needed to be checked, how they needed to be checked, but what happened after that was a grey area, and none of these agencies confirmed what exactly owners were obligated to do. Obviously, there was things, if they weren't working, that applied to normal rental standards that needed to be done, like if your heater wasn't working or no power to the property, things like that. But on standard non-compliant issues on whether an owner had to have them done or not, and what was the punishments, that was a big question we got a lot from owners and passed on through to property managers was, okay, if I don't get this done, what's the repercussions of this all? So none of these agencies made it any clearer until recently. So obviously left us in the dark hole in the web, and we couldn't really figure out what was going on. We tried our best, and we assumed the worst. We said it's best to get it done because we don't know what's coming, and it's taken them 4.5 years to bring in a task force. So that's where we're at currently. There obviously is also a highly competitive supply market, which leads to low-cost pop-up businesses. When we first started, it was just us and kind of Smart House, which was another competitor, and now everyone's doing safety checks 4 years on. And even your local trades are now doing it. There's lots of different companies out there now, and it makes it harder to choose. You're looking at so many. One price might differ from the next, and the quality of work we have seen has diminished. I've personally seen that myself in my own property. So it's made it difficult for you guys as owners and difficult for your PMs as well to determine if these trades should be doing the work, are qualified to be doing the work, and what actually needs to be done to meet minimum standards. So it's left you feeling frustrated. It's hard to know if these companies are doing the right thing. So the task force, our good old friends at Consumer Affairs, this has been very interesting. So we have seen the task force out in many different areas. They did start in Ballarat, and I actually managed the agencies out there, so I do know firsthand what Consumer Affairs were looking for when they were down there. They came in with a pre-prescribed list of properties from VCAT, so whether they had been to VCAT for maintenance, rent arrears, anything. They were checking licenses, like license numbers on the compliance forms, to see if those trades were qualified. Now, thankfully, all our service reports do have the trades license numbers on them, and all our trades are licensed for gas and electrical. They also, which meant those property managers had to go back to those trades and make sure they were qualified to do the work, and they could have faced fines if they weren't, which created more admin for them. They had to follow them out. They're also going to open for inspections currently, and checking for minimum standards. So we've heard as many as 4 people from Consumer Affairs fully uniformed to identify themselves, rocking up to properties on a Saturday, walking through them, seeing if they're checking electrical switchboards, checking if there's mould, checking that there's locks, adequate locks, window fittings, everything like that.
Just to clarify though, that's just for properties that are vacant, they're not knocking on doors.
No, that's for advertised properties. So if your property is up for lease on realestate.com or Domain, chances are Consumer Affairs could walk through it on a Saturday or during the week as well. I was out in an agency last week and I was going through this same spiel, and that's where they said, oh, I actually did have that happen to me just Saturday, just gone. It was the first time it happened. So they are getting around slowly, but they are out there. If your property's not meeting minimum standards or you can't show that the property's had safety checks, they are going into the agencies that following week if there's been any issues that they've arisen, and they have been issuing fines. They've issued around $500,000 worth of fines so far this year. So, as Hayley said, she obviously said there was some fines issued that will be included in that $500,000, but they are out there, they are cracking down, and they're just trying to make sure that people are doing the right thing. Not necessarily obviously agencies, but owners as well are listening to their agencies. So because of this, that we've been able to determine finally what Consumer Affairs are looking for. They've finally defined what they care about, what they want, and what they think rental properties should be doing, especially in relation to safety checks. So we have actually changed the way we do our service reports as of October. We used to have sections of if it was compliant, non-compliant, if it was a safety-related issue, what was a recommendation. We've been able to categorise them into 3 sections now instead of, say, I think we had about 7 or 8, which has made it easier for you guys as owners and your property managers to understand. You can ask the question now, what needs to be done? What do I have to have done? Anything that is under urgent, which is in line with what Consumer Affairs consider urgent, is what needs to be done and actioned as soon as possible. Anything that comes under safety-related issue should be done, but doesn't have to be done, and it's not an urgent matter. Anything that comes under other findings is recommended to be done. It's best practice to be done. It's just still non-compliant. So you could still have non-compliant issues, but they fall under safety-related or other, but that you don't have to specifically, you're not going to be marked if it's not completed. Whereas if you have urgent, that's where you're going to see Consumer Affairs on your back and asking why these things haven't been done, why the property has urgent maintenance and it hasn't been attended to. So this is the direct list from Consumer Affairs in relation to minimum standards and urgent repairs. Oh, sorry guys, that echoed. Exactly what needs to be done and what they consider urgent as well. They've clarified, and what we have on our list is exactly the same. It mirrors it, so it makes it easier for you. We also have where previously it would be compliant if everything according to the Australian Building Standards, the VBA and Energy Safe Australia was considered compliant, you would get a compliant tick. Now with the way we have redesigned it, it is, you'll get non-compliant because you have urgent repairs, but if you have no urgent repairs and safety related or other findings, you'll get that green tick to say your property is compliant with no urgent repairs. That's what we seen like a lot of owners wanted. They just wanted to know that they had done everything that they needed to do. So we've clearly outlined it in our quotes and our service reports, so it's easier for you guys to understand, because at the moment, property managers and owners are expected to be trades and have qualified electricians and plumbers, and that's just not the day and age that we live in. But it is what is expected. So how's Consumer Affairs focuses on minimum standards and safety related. So they declare to comply at the beginning of the lease. So before a renter, a lease is signed, and within 12 months prior to a lease, and then before a renter moves in or as soon as possible. So if your property has a current lease, needs to have everything done, but this kind of doesn't apply as of this afternoon. All properties need to. Obviously, there'll be a grace period of that. If it's a new build or a new property that you've just purchased and it's never been a rental property before and you're going to lease it out again, that's where you don't necessarily have to have the safety checks done when it's vacant, but you do have to have them done as soon as possible, because sometimes it might be hard to connect power, or you want it done while the renter moves in. It just has to be done as soon as it's possible to be done. This is a look of our service reports. As you can see, this one says that this is what it looks like when it's got urgent repairs. So we've clearly labelled that it's got urgent repairs and what needs to be done. You can view the quote from the service report, and then we've got what is you should do with safety related issues, and you've got the other recommendations as well. Sometimes you might just want to get everything done, but we do also understand that not everything, you might have had a list of maintenance that's already been done, and this is just another thing piled on top. So we've made it easy to identify. So if you want to get those things done now and then the other things later, you can. Our quotes are itemised for you as well. And it's, again, in line with the RTA's clarifications of what urgent repairs are. And whether we do the works or whether you get a third party to do the works, that's totally fine, as long as the urgent repairs are attended to as soon as possible. This is what one looks like when it's just got the safety related recommendations and the other recommendations as well. So you've got that compliant tick because there's no urgent repairs, which makes it easier. You know what needs to be done, and it's, again, what it should be, what you ideally want your reports to be looking like, but sometimes that's not possible. Like I said, urgent repairs must do. Safety related findings is what you should do, because most of them are things, if the renter was to report it, you should be getting done within the 14 days, but it's not considered urgent maintenance. And then other findings is what you could be doing to make your property even safer. So what we've seen is the way we're categorising it now, we're doing a lot less repairs that need to be done urgently. So, only 30% of quotes now have urgent repairs and that are actually required to be done. 20% of safety related findings, and about 50% are the other findings that didn't necessarily need to be done ASAP. Comparing different providers. So why Detector Inspector? So our scale and ability to complete all necessary works required for all three services along quoted and urgent works. We're just, not to blow our own horn, we're a bit top tier compared to a lot of other companies. We've been established for longer. We know what we're doing. All our trades are also fully qualified. Our innovation, the ways we streamline and communicate and automate our communication and documents relating to our services. So we have a compliance portal that your property managers have fully access. We have a support team that you guys can call, that your property managers can call, that your renters can call, and ask any questions on bookings, your checks, your service reports, if you want to enroll your property, if you have questions about things. We offer that support 5 days a week, 9 till 5:30, and it makes it easier. You've got somebody at the end of the line, and they're all based in our Melbourne office. We're a market leader. Like I said, we are the #1 in Australia for compliance. We've got the Safer Home Plan, which is no other competitor or other compliance provider actually offers the same pricing structure or the call-outs and extras that we do and have included in our plan. We also make homes, we make safer homes. That's what we're about. We're about safety. We want people to have that peace of mind that their property's safe, that if things go wrong, that they can rely on our service reports and our trades to be reporting the correct things as per the legislation. Our point of difference, again, with our Safer Home Plan, we have free inclusions. So those things include free call-outs for smoke, electrical, and gas. We also have small parts included in those things too. We offer temporary heating. So if your heater has been capped off by us, we do leave temporary heating and offer it to the renter. Or if breaks down, if the renter moves in and report a pilot light has not been, it can't light, we go out and that's free of charge. If there's obviously an issue with the pilot light and what the hot water service of why it's not lighting, then we'll offer a quote if it's not something that is included in our safer home plan. But you're saving on that initial call out. You're not paying a gas plumber upwards of, $180, $300 depending on the time of day for those things. We also do free smoke alarm replacement. We do standard light switches and power points. So if they've got cracks or, the switches are flimsy, we replace them. And it's not just, we do most of those during our service, but we do those in call outs as well. So if your property manager goes, the smoke alarm's chirping or they've got cracks, power points or light switches, they can report it to us and we'll go out and replace them, and it doesn't cost you anything because it's already included in the plan that you pay with us. We've got liability cover. So if you have come over from a previous provider and enrolled in the Safer Home Plan with us, or you've got a brand new build and enroll in the Safer Home Plan with us, you won't pay, say, for the first 12 months until your checks are due, but your property is covered under our Safer Home Plan. And if anything happens, we will go out and make sure that, you smoke 9 times out of 10 with new builds, a smoke alarm goes well before it's due. And your builders, most likely, they don't really go out after 90 days. So you can rely on us to go out and fix that issue for you, and it's included in your Safer Home Plan. Like I said, all of our techs are licensed. We do gas A, type A gas fitting as gas, oh my God. Type A gas we do actually offer that in training. We actually have a training facility on site with master plumbers, so we can ensure that all of our techs who we employ might not have gas certification will get it with us, and through master plumbers. Obviously we don't test them ourselves, it is a third party that does it, but we do offer that training on site and make sure that they're fully qualified to be doing the checks that we're employing them to do. We have technology integration, so most property software systems we integrate with, so that means we streamline your renter's information to our system. Less work for your property managers to be uploading and updating renter details. It means that we can book in the checks faster, meaning that less properties become overdue and their properties are getting serviced on time. We have real-time reporting, so as soon as we finish at a property, our techs are tracked, they upload through their app into the service report, our team can view it straight away. In about a couple of days, your property managers have access to that report as well, and in turn, you guys have access to that report through your property manager. We have set and forget compliance. So once your property is on the Safer Home Plan, your property manager doesn't have to keep track of when your services are due, because we keep track of that. We take on that responsibility. About 4 weeks before your property is due for any service, we start contacting your renter to go out and get those checks to help avoid them becoming overdue, because some renters can be difficult every now and again booking those in. The time on site that we spend, so per smoke alarm, it's pretty simple. A smoke alarm service is usually pretty quick. Per smoke alarm, we're probably spending about roughly 3 to 5 minutes. Now, it is more than just checking that it's beeping and replacing the battery. We do a smoke canisters test and clean your smoke alarms as well. So it's not just pressing a button, replacing the battery, it's a little bit more to it. Our electrical services on average is about 45 minutes to an hour, and that's just based on an average 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom home, and that's with no issues identified. So obviously most properties we go to, there would be issues identified. You might need to have a switchboard or something tripping the power or something like that. So it will go into longer periods while our team investigates what's happening. The same with gas, so single gas appliances, which includes the gas main as well, and no issues identified. We're spending about 15 to 30 minutes at the property. And then with 2 gas appliances or more, and the gas main, with no issues identified again, it's about 45 minutes to an hour and a half. So again, sometimes we see that there's a gas leak or any, that's when we can go into longer and we do spend more time on site. This is the fun one that I really enjoy speaking about. Are you sure your compliance checks are making your home a safer home? So in roughly a year and a bit ago, we did a mystery shop of 21 other safety providers. The reason we wanted to do that is because there were so many in the market. Well, they're all charging different prices, offering different things, and we just wanted to see what other people were doing within Victoria. This process had revealed really appalling things. The level of quality being delivered in general was really bad. Most companies weren't servicing properties to the standard that needed to be and what was legally required of them. So really, the owners that were employing them weren't getting what they were paying them to do. Again, they didn't adhere to what we thought was, sorry, I've lost it because it's in the red. The level of service that was being provided, it just was not where it needed to be and what was legally required. They weren't even doing the basics of what actually had to be done. So about 61% didn't check all smoke alarms. So 21 of 60% didn't check smoke alarms, and a third of them didn't even check a single smoke alarm. So that was quite alarming because smoke alarms do save lives. So 80% didn't complete all of the checks on the PowerPoints. So it's a simple check, it doesn't take long, and if it's accessible, you plug something in, you check it, and they weren't even doing that. They also failed to identify a few faults that were in the property that our techs had identified, and so 60% of them didn't even pick those up. So that was a safety concern as well. The biggest eye-opener was the gas safety check. Now, 80% of cooktops and hot water systems were skipped during the service, and 80% did not check the heat exchanger for evidence of cracks. Now, the heat exchanger on a heater is what carbon monoxide normally leaks out of. So most of them weren't even opening up covers and actually physically checking and servicing the heater, which is, it's not only a gas safety check, it's a gas safety check and service. So what we found is most of them weren't even completing the service element of the safety check, which is essentially what you're paying for. This is a video documenting our tech doing a complete service on a ducted heater and another provider completing the gas service on the heater.
Excuse me, how big was the sample?
It was 21 providers.
No, how many homes did you?
So this was all at the same property.
Oh, so you had 21 providers go through one property?
Yeah. So this is at the same property, these videos.
Okay.
And we have done multiple rounds after it at different properties as well and found the same thing. So as you can see, they're not taking the covers and things off the things properly. Our tech is completely taking it apart and he's only taking the top off. And that's not where the heat exchanger is, just for everyone that doesn't know. And he's probably taken about 3 photos of that heater. And that was the complete safety check completed by that trade. I don't want to keep playing this, sorry guys. So what we found is some trades were spending, I had ones recently at my house, 11 minutes, 2 trades to do safety, to do electrical and gas, and they were there for 11 minutes. I have 3 gas appliances, and one of them is a space heater that has no negative pressure, which means that the gas has come back into my property and they didn't pick it up. So that's obviously dangerous. I have a young child at home and that is alarming. So they also had completed, I think, about 11 checks that morning at 11 different properties. We don't do that many properties in one day unless there's smoke, because obviously that's a lot quicker service. That is what was alarming to us, so that some of these companies were spending as little as 6 minutes to complete a gas service. The things that you should be looking for on your service reports with other providers, and ours, go free to check ours if you're with us, but you'll be able to see the difference. We have photos that are time-stamped and dated. We have multiple photos. We're not just taking a photo of your smoke alarm. There will be a photo of the smoke alarm. It opened with the date, everything like that. Your heater will be completely pulled apart. What we found in the service reports with other providers is that there was not as many photos. If there's no photos of your heat exchanger from your service report and you've got a gas heater, then 9 times out of 10 they probably haven't checked it because they haven't even pulled it apart. Things like that is what you need. If there's no photos of your gas main, they probably haven't checked your gas main. So they're really good indicators. The switchboard was also really alarming. A lot of people weren't even pulling the switchboard apart. They were just opening the mains up, taking a photo, and that was it. So if you have a service report and it's just that one photo of your switchboard and it's not taken apart to actually check behind it, they haven't completed the safety checks to a standard. And then all I've got left is just to touch on what Hayley went over with the proposed future regulations. Obviously with the heating and cooling, as well as the hot water system, they're the ones that do relate to the safety compliance part of things. Obviously, if we deem something that needs to be replaced, it will probably have to be replaced with an electrical appliance, because the government wants to go further and not have gas in homes. You're probably already getting calls from the government about the hot water systems like I am. And that concludes that. Any questions? Yes. Yes, that's meant to be included in your gas check. Was there a bush or anything around it? Interesting. I'll come chat to you after and get that address so I can look it up myself, and I'll be able to provide you with an explanation, like what happened and if something has gone wrong.
My property is not a modern property. It was built as a building in the 70s. So the kitchen cabinetry, the space between the top and is not the 900.
Is 600 mil.
So do they take into consideration the fact that it's an old property and therefore it's compliant when it was done? Or are they saying, well, no, rules have changed, we've now got to go to the compliance status, which requires major cabinetry change?
Correct. So previously to Consumer Affairs actually outlining what they're looking for, there wasn't clear on what properties. That was a big one that came up. Like we would have, it's meant to be so a property is built and the to those building standards at the time. But over time, building standards change, so the property is meant to meet those building standards. But there wasn't anything in place until now to say that you as an owner and a rental provider had to do anything to change that. As long as it's above 450, which is the safety zone, if it's below 450, then it has to be capped off because it's dangerous. But if it's over 450 and under 600, it's considered non-compliant as per the building standard. However, Consumer Affairs have said that things like that do not come under the urgent repairs category and technically can stay that way as long as that, unless you do a kitchen renovation, then obviously you have to build it to the standard. Yeah. 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 That was it was a common one, and we couldn't answer. You know, the question was, what's going to happen if I don't do it? And we couldn't tell anyone. Nobody knew. It wasn't a question that was answered until recently.
We'll have to wrap that one up and move on to Lee. We are running it over time. Thanks, Jordan.
No worries.
Yes, we gave it to, I think so. Can you check, Ray, can you check if the presentation's set up for Lee? Yep, thank you.
You don't need to duct tape your presentation? Okay, that is lucky.
Oh.
Yeah, it might slip off. That's why we had to duct tape.
Wow. Hi everybody. I will be hopefully a lot more dry. That sounds really serious, some of the last stuff that's been happening, so apologies. Hopefully this means nothing to anyone and no one needs finance, but if they do, I'm obviously here to help you. Anyway, look, thanks to McGrath for inviting. Technical issue, hold on a second. Okay, guys, that means I'm without my notes, so I'm just going to have to wing it. Here we go. Happy with this? Yeah, okay. Again, thank you. Okay. So I was invited here today and asked to just have a chat about where the finance market is sitting at the moment, particularly with relation to investors. More importantly, who's doing the lending at the moment, where interest rates are sitting, and any changes that we expect to see in the interest rates over the next foreseeable future. What we do here at Blue Lion is we help secure families' futures through exposure to and leverage off property. And the main thing is we want to try and make sure that no one ever has to rely on the pension. So whether that be building investment property portfolios out for people so they've got an income stream later on in retirement, or getting first home buyers into properties, or assisting people to help pay down their owner-occupied property so they can relax when they get a little bit older. That is our bread and butter. So just an overview of what we'll go over. I've briefly touched on it, so we'll go over some rate history and forecasts, some predictions. Now, I just want to let you know I don't have a crystal ball, so I'm not going to be telling you what's going to happen. I will be giving you my best estimates based on the data available. I'm also going to be talking about who's borrowing in the economy. A lot of you are seasoned investors, I believe, probably in the inner north, judging by this real estate agency. So some green shoots that are happening in the market, and then what you can do to counter the increased costs that you would have been experiencing in both compliance, interest rates and taxes over the past few years. Okay, so you should all be quite knowledgeable of this graph on the left. So that's the Australian cash rate target over the past 30 years. Over the past 2 years or 3 years, we've experienced the most aggressive amount of interest rate tightening potentially ever seen in the Australian market. I think we had 13 interest rate increases in the space of about 18 months. Now to the right is where most or a good chunk of the advanced economies that we compare ourselves to are sitting at the moment. So they had all similar interest rate increases to us over a similar period, but they all started a little bit earlier, they all finished a little bit earlier, and all of these guys have started to come down. The major one that the US starts to the US, major one that everyone else is talking about, has dropped their interest rates 75 basis points in the last few months. So there's some reason potentially to be optimistic if you're looking for an interest rate change. However, Michelle Bullock is our new RBA governor, and she does not like to make forward predictions. So I'm just going to read you out some things that she said at the last interest rate meeting. The board decided to leave the cash rate unchanged. The forecasts published today are very similar to those published in August. The board needs to be confident that inflation is moving sustainably towards the target, and we need to see more progress in underlying inflation coming down. And slightly contrary to that, she said monetary policy is restrictive, and that's showing up in a number of parts of demand, including private sector demand. So Michelle Bullock does not want to provide any forward guidance, as you can understand, because her predecessor basically got sacked over the forward guidance he provided during COVID. He can't be sacked, obviously, but he got politically pressured out. So if we can't trust Michelle Bullock and we can't believe what's going to be happening in other advanced economies, what can we trust? So the next place to look for this is probably the money markets. That's how that's how all the big banks set their interest rates. Their fixed interest rates are basically on-sold from the money markets. And to a certain degree, you can look towards that to see where variable rates are going to go. So this was a 3-year bond yield as pulled yesterday. And you can see the 3-year bond yield is sitting just below 4.2%. Now our RBA rate is 4.35. Now that's our 3-year bond rate, so that is not actually counting too many decreases over the next 3 years. But what I want to point you towards is, this is a 12-month graph, is the significant dip that we had in September, and then the large increase we had just in the last month to what people think will be happening to 3-year interest rates. A few months ago, everyone was saying we're going to get 3 or 4 interest rate cuts next year. Now, people are going, well, we might get an interest rate cut in March. And you can see that in this data. Now, we might get an interest rate cut in March, but some people are saying it's not going to happen until the end of the year, if at all. No one really knows to be sure. But I want you to pay some attention to that graph, particularly that dip in September, because I'm going to talk about why that's important later. Now we're going to get into finance and lending. Now, contrary to what most people might believe living in Victoria, investor lending is up. So investor lending is probably the highest it's ever actually been. These are in millions, so I think it's 13 billion for the month, something like that. It had a slight dip last month. This is the latest data from CoreLogic, but it's actually up. Now, the amount of investor lending nationwide is at 38.3%, which is higher than our 5-year average of 33%. Now, that's nationwide. I'm going to point you towards what that looks like in Victoria. So this is a state-by-state breakdown. Victoria is the top middle one, and you can see Victoria and Tasmania have kind of middled along sideways for the past few years and haven't really increased their investor lending. Investor lending has shot through the roof in South Australia, WA, Queensland, to a lesser extent New South Wales, but you'll probably all be seeing that in the property prices going crazy. I think WA has potentially had an increase of 60% in the last couple of years, and people are saying it might even get to 100% over the last 5 years, which, if it does, it's phenomenal. Last time they had something like that, they then stagnated and went backwards for 10 years. So, expecting that to come here, by the way. I'll talk about that later. Now, who's actually buying in this economy? This is the first home buyer graph. It's jumbled up. You can't really tell a lot from the data there unless you look at it really closely. And what you can see, since COVID, or since 21 actually, since the interest rates have started coming back up, ironically, first home buyers in Victoria have charged, and we've actually got the largest proportion of first home buyers in Victoria compared to any other state in Australia. So you can see that 33.1% of all buyers in the market at the moment are first home buyers. And that potentially is why you're seeing maybe a flight towards the cheaper quality property or the cheaper properties, because it's the first home buyers entering the market, and it's the potentially the investors and the upsizers that are just holding on for now. This is lending patterns. Now, I don't know when the last time anyone got a loan here was, But if no one's gotten a loan for a while, this is where I see the real change in lending over the past, say, 5 or 6 years. If you'd come to me as a consumer, compared to 2 years ago, you'd go, that's a bit steep, Lee. Are those interest rates that expensive? Are you kidding me? And I'd be like, yeah, they kind of are. But for a back end, from what the actual banks look at, they look at the debt to income ratio and compare that, and that is how they gauge whether or not the economy is healthy or not, and whether or not lending's healthy within the economy. So those two middle graphs there, they talk about debt to income ratios. Not too long ago, banks were writing debt to income ratios of about 8 times. So if you had a rental incomes of 100 grand a year, an income of 150 grand a year, that's 350 grand. You could multiply that by 8, and that's roughly how much you could borrow. These days, only 5% of people are borrowing more than 6. So that is the really huge difference. And if you're an owner-occupier coming to the market at the moment, and you don't have lots of home debt, and maybe you're a couple, maybe you've got one child, you're probably looking at about 5.5% debt to income ratio. Sorry, not 5.5%, 5.5 times debt to income ratio. Whereas not long ago, we were talking about 6 for an owner-occupier, 8 maybe for an investor. And this is actually what the government's trying to get. They want to get that debt to income ratio down to try and make it a more balanced and sustainable market. Now, what's the next slide? Okay, I'll get to how we can change that for each of you later on. If you actually do want more debt, if you don't want more debt, fantastic, pay it down, relax, go play golf, good on you. But if you do want debt, there's ways around it, okay? Now I'm just going to talk about green shoots in the Victorian property market in particular. This is more anecdotal. I talk to buyers advocates, national buyers advocates, I think every day at the moment. And what I'm seeing is actually a flight towards Victoria of interest. South Australia, Queensland, WA, they've all shot the lights out. They're potentially near their peaks. They might have a little bit more to run, but if you're going in there to buy a property now, it's probably taking you 3, 4, 5 months to execute, have it settled, and there's a good chance they'll be close towards the end of their run. Now, if we go back to this slide here, you can see investor lending in Victoria has been stagnant since about 2021. That combined with the next 2 slides, which is, I pulled out Northcote because that's where we're based at the moment. Residential vacancy rates in Northcote plummeting, even compared to pre-COVID levels. Asking rents going up. This is over the past 14 years, and with a large spike, hopefully not all due to compliance, over the last couple of years. People are starting to look to Victoria. They're actually starting to look to the northern suburbs of Melbourne. I don't know exactly where yet. I'll tell you when I know, okay? So that's some green shoots towards Victoria. And we can expect to see that probably over the next 5 years as the other states start to decline. Now, that's all about the lending, spoken about that. You can ask me questions on that later. Now, for a lot of you in the room, it'll be, well, I know that lead, thanks very much, but I'm struggling, I've got all these compliance costs, what do I do? So there's a whole lot of different ways to do it, how you can counter those increased costs. There's 4 potential ways here. Each of these is suitable for different people. If you want to change to interest only, that's obviously the easiest and no-brainer. It's the simplest way to do it. You can potentially cut 25% out of your costs, depending on the term that you're looking at. You can increase terms. One of the ones I like to do, which takes a really long time, but is the most legal and best way to do it, is basically to recycle the debt. So to start shifting all your debt through smart investing into investments and taking it away from your owner-occupied and just quashing that owner-occupied debt entirely. With the changes in the land tax rates, especially in Victoria, and the lowering of all the thresholds, as you would have known, I imagine, the more expensive the property is, the more you actually pay in land tax. You can look to potentially buy in different entities which have different overall land tax rates. You could look to buy cheaper properties. The entities is generally the best way that I want to target things like that. So really smart structuring to make sure that you don't get hit with all these increased costs and taxes. Now, don't go doing these without talking to someone because they are quite specific to each person. These rates. So I actually don't normally show rates, but Ray had a chat to me and said, hey, I want you to show rates. So I'm like, okay, here's some rates. So we're seeing some real cracker rates at the moment. This is just a little bit of a selection. I'm getting owner-occupied rates below 6% at a few select banks and one major bank. It wasn't long ago I was getting 5.9% at a major bank for a principal and interest owner-occupied loan. Some of the best, most of your investors, so we'll go towards the investor loans, investment variable loans, P&I low sixes, interest only, low to mid sixes. The best deals I'm seeing at the moment are actually with non-major lenders that want to start moving in towards the investor space. They've traditionally been out of it. Maybe they've had a capital injection from overseas, from their overseas parents, and they really want more investor loans. They're offering some fantastic deals at the moment. Now, some of the best stuff is if you actually want fixed. Now, getting back to the 3-year forecast of rates that I showed you earlier, remember that dip in September? One shake, another shake. Okay, people are listening, fantastic. There was a dip in September. Now that dip is where the major banks go and source their wholesale funding. So when they sell you a rate at 5%, they don't sell you a rate at 5% thinking, oh, the market's going to drop, the RBA is going to drop the rate. They sell you 5% because they've gone and bought it at 4% somewhere else. So there's a whole lot of banks, there's a few banks, sorry, that in September went up and bought large chunks of debt that haven't sold all that debt. So there's still these great fixed interest rates sitting around that you could potentially take advantage of, but they are going to be sold because they were bought in September. So that's an opportunity if you know the right banks to go to and you speak to someone that can help you with that. Now, all these rates change on a daily basis. You need to have someone all over it. ChatGPT's got a time limit on it. It's not going to tell you if you ask it. It's several months old. So you need someone here that's going to guide you through these. And that's it. Any questions? Thank you. Simple. Okay.
Thanks, Luke. I know it's getting very late, so I'm going to wrap up the night, but I will introduce you to our sales team. Not that we want you to sell, we want you to stay. But if you are considering selling, I've got Luke Brizzi at the back, Michael DeVito and Anthony Diesi. Also Gino Diesi, principal. If you are looking at selling and want to talk to them about a rental appraisal, you can talk to me about that. A sale appraisal, you can go up and have a chat to them about that. All right, thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it.
I'm Brian Benjamin. I've been with you for about 20 years.
Oh, how are you?
So I was always
Oh, good. Well, I'm glad you said that.
no, she's very, I like a lot of properties.
Yes.
And I've got a few with Ray White in, oh really? Ray White in Northern Suburbs. I've got a stack with Woodard and Stacey's my most responsible agent.
Oh, good. I'm glad you said that. That's great.
Make sure you can know that.
I've been with us for a long time.
Because I actually gave you 3 practices.
I'm not sure that so I've got Sue's, mate.